Hello and welcome again to the episode 2 of Durindal HQ, the official podcast of Durindal. The one that, if you're listening to this now, as we release it on Tuesday, 29th of August, if you're listening to this now, you are early. If you're listening to this when you're supposed to listen to this, probably in 2028, welcome from the past. You're trying to figure out how we did it. I'm happy to have you here. Have fun. And I'm here with my partner, Garrath. Garrath, how are you doing, brother?
Freaking fantastic, honestly. I love how you lead into these with like, if you're here from the future, sorry you missed out, but this is how we started. I love these things.
That's what we're making this for, right? Again, I think we mentioned it last time. It's the thing like it stuck to me. Gary Vee gets a lot of hate, but he said once, imagine if Mark Zuckerberg and his friends had documented themselves while building Facebook. How many views that content will have today? We said that thing probably 10 years ago, and I thought that stuck with me, and that's why I'm glad that we're doing this.
Yeah, I think one of the best parts about doing this is it allows us to share what we're learning in real time. When we were doing some research on, what do we want our weekly podcast to be about? It's like, okay, we could talk about all these other topics everybody else talks about, or we could just lean on the engagements that we're having with our clients, what we're learning in real time, share some of those things. And not everything needs to be about go to market and sales and ops and all those. We might come one week and the focus is on leadership development. We might come one week and the focus is on, hey, we're noticing a trend where the tech market's evolving, like with a potential client that we're talking with right now. So I think it gives us the ability to stay a little bit adaptable to providing information that people actually can use versus, well, this is how you should run your marketing. This is how you should run your sales. That gets a little bit old.
It gets boring, right? Like we talk about it every day on LinkedIn. That's what we tell clients. It's gonna it starts to pile up and it starts to get boring. So I agree. And
Yeah.
it's good, that way we can tell people from the present or from the future. We can tell them like the pivots, the directions, the news.
Should we share what our goals are with Durindal over the next 5, 10 years? I know that we're not supposed to plan that far ahead. Conventional wisdom would tell us that you guys are crazy and you can't think that far
That's
ahead.
an incentive, dude. If people tell us we're crazy, that's an incentive to do it. Yes, I think we should share the 10-year vision. I will let you share it because I did the intro, right? And if somebody's listening, I don't want them to just get overwhelmed by just hearing me ramble.
Yeah, but you have like a very sultry voice. I think people enjoy listening to it.
It's funny because for the longest time, I used to hate my voice. I couldn't listen to it.
And now it's just like, you know,
Now I don't care anymore. So I'm glad to know it's pleasant. But even if it wasn't, I need to keep talking.
yeah. So our goals with Durindal, right? I think the reason that we brought two great minds together, not to toot my own horn, but I'll gladly toot yours. But the whole purpose of building this together is, we talked about in the last episode how many phone calls we had that were 4, 5, 6 hours long. And we developed this shared vision together of, okay, do we want to build something that everybody else is building? We do your go-to-market strategy, we do your ops, we help you with leadership, we help you with demand gen, we help you with sales training. Or do we want to build something that is truly unique that nobody else is building? And I think that with your background and my background, combining those two, we kind of set that 10, 15-year vision where we told each other, hey, like, it would be really cool to be the guys that get called in when shit hits the fan on like a large merger and acquisition deal or an enterprise company that is dealing with, a vertical that's starting to slip or one of those things where it's high leverage, high intensity, and high pressure on everybody involved. And who's their go-to guys when they need a fix and an answer, time now. And I think we both share a vision not only of ourselves, but with the company where we say, hey, you know what? That's where we want to get to. We don't want to just be this typical, run of the mill, go to market strategy firm or sales firm. we want to be the guys that you call when shit hits the fan and you know that you can trust to deliver. And so I think, the skills we have now certainly provide a great foundation for that. And the clients and the partnerships that we're developing is definitely getting us a lot closer to that. So I think in a nutshell, we're the special forces team you call when shit hits the fan in the business. Or, you're on a large merger and acquisition deal and you can't get the deal over the line and you need Seb's sultry voice to bring it over the line.
Whatever gets the deal signed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is a this is what's becoming, what will be a 250 people business in terms of number of employees. That's the ultimate goal. And yeah, I don't think that's the reason why I stopped doing only consulting. You stopped doing only go to market. We didn't want this to be that limiting. And I'm a person that gets easily bored. I will master something and move on very quickly.
Yep.
So if we keep the scope narrow enough to make money and broad enough that none of us gets bored, I think we have a winning spot. And it's funny because the partnerships we have right now, they are already providing parts of what we envision. Like we see the seeds of that. We have a project with a company in San Diego that we're getting brought in to make a difference in our respective areas of expertise. And cannot share much about that, but that's what it is. We have another potential partner that's calling us because shit hit the fan and they don't know what to do with very specific types of negotiations.
Yeah.
Like we are there even though we aren't there yet, which is
Yeah.
a weird thing to say, but it's true.
Well, I think that, people inherently know the value that you bring to the table. It's in how you carry yourself, it's in how you talk about your profession. That passion that we both have for what we do, I think is very evident. And I think the big thing is we don't speak in jargon, we don't speak in lingo, we just shoot it straight. We just kind of tell it like it is, of like, hey, this is the reality of the situation. I don't have any way to butter this up for you because, those kind of consultants, they serve a purpose when, things are going well and you need to keep people aligned and keep the motion going. But, in a high leverage situation, there's no time for roses and flowers. We can do all that once the problem's been solved. And, what I find really interesting is like, the client we're working with now, listen, we have people that have 5, 10, 15 exits, and we've got NASA scientists on board, and we still can't figure this out. We're going to call in Garrath and Seb. Again, kind of that quick reaction force mindset. We're calling these guys in because we know that they can solve the problem. And I think this goes to the point of like never having to pitch your services, right? You don't have to pitch if there's a real, level of value that you provide that's actually unique in the market. People will see that. And I think this is a situation where they've got a lot of great minds on board, but even collectively, maybe the Achilles heel is that they're really smart technical people. They're smart engineers. They're really smart 0 to 1 builders. But there's a level of expertise we bring from the Series A world all the way up to enterprise where we haven't just been kind of siloed into one stage of business maturity our whole careers. We've been able to kind of see the full scope of how businesses develop over time, whether it's a 10-person company or a 10,000 person company. So not a lot of people have that, and that's what we bring to the table. And I'd say collectively, I don't want to toot our own horns again, but you know,
I mean, if we don't brag about ourselves, it's gonna brag for us, though.
well, our haters will brag, and they will tell everybody how much we suck and how awful we are.
We don't have enough of those yet. That's a PR problem that I need to fix. I need to get us some haters.
I know. And how
And
do we
people are gonna think I'm shit talking, but I'm not. I do need to get us some haters. They are extremely useful. They are a lot of entertainment. It's a great PR thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, at some point we need them.
Yeah. What's interesting too is I think that there's a lot to be said that if you're going to build a business that actually sustains and survives long term, if everybody's agreeing with what you're doing, you're probably not going to be around long term. that, and I don't just say that to say that. I say it because haters aren't truly haters in the sense that like they just hate who you are and they hate what you're doing. A lot of that hate just comes from a misunderstanding. They don't have the perception that you have. They might not have the level of intel or knowledge that you have around a specific thing. And so it's not so much as hating as it is, a difference in worldviews. But, I think the fun part, especially for you, would be, you know, changing that perception and turning a hater into a lover and somebody who truly sees what the vision is. I think that's so much fun in business. And a lot of people just avoid that altogether. They play it safe, they play with their tails tucked between their legs. They speak like everyone else, they talk like everyone else, they go where everybody else goes, and they never really create or carve out their own unique path that's truly separates you from what everybody else is doing. And I believe that is exactly what we're doing. And if I had to take the conversations we've had the last 30 days, I'd say it's been pretty effective.
I mean, I would love to convert a hater, but only if we have a big enough pool of haters that converting some of them doesn't remove
Yeah.
the general group of them.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, the conversations that we've been having, they have been interesting. It's like we recently, summer, slow months.
Yeah.
So we started training founders
Yeah.
in SWOT, and Camila had this concern, like reading the first pages, she had only the first 27 pages of SWOT, and she told me, don't you think this is like a psychology degree condensed in one book? And I go, yes, it kind of is. But she goes, then that means it's not beginner friendly. Like the SWOT sales method
Yeah.
is for pros, and it looks like the book will be for sales professionals, already like seasoned professionals. And then that stuck with me until we signed our founder client. And she started getting results in 5 days. Incredible results. Like
Yeah.
a first week where you take 4 calls and you close all of them. It's beyond strange. It's an amazing result. And that kind of proved the point that into a 3 to 4 hour intensive for a founder, so that it's still worth our time while still providing value.
Yep.
And that's what we did. And that's what we're doing, actually. It's about to happen. And it's going to be interesting. I'm weirdly enough, I am excited about serving some founders. We only
Yeah.
have the time to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's two common themes that show up in the founder landscape. One of those is, the over reliance on the founder led brand, which is, well, my brand will bring in the inbound leads and then, people will just automatically want to be my customer or my client. And there's still this layer of, diagnosing, failure mapping, actually tying back your services to a tangible end result that they can achieve quickly. And a lot of the sales methodologies that are out there, you know, they don't really address those effectively whatsoever. They're outdated. And then you have this situation where founders, their operations are a complete mess and it doesn't become a big enough pain point until you're actually selling at such a high level that that system starts to break. And where we cover this from both ends of the spectrum is, well, number one, we have to get your sales performing at a high level. You don't truly have product market fit until you have consistent sales coming through the door, until you have consistent revenue coming through the door. And, once you get that to a certain point, that's when you start to identify, wow, like I really do have a tangible brand here. Your brand will bring in the leads, but ultimately your ability to establish a real relationship. And I know these are kind of dirty words to a lot of founders. I think founders get into business, they have a very esoteric view of business, but at the end of the day, you still have to be able to close. So actually, here's a good one. What do you see with founders that gets in their way more often than not when it does come to sales? I think what I see is founders, again, are great at leveraging their brand to bring in inbound leads, but then there's a little bit of a disconnect from, I have a ton of leads, but I can't close them.
What I see when it comes to founders and sales is that one element is cultural. In the West, we've been taught that selling is pressure, that selling is manipulation. Even though we love to buy,
Yeah.
we hate being sold to, and therefore we hate selling. And I used to be that person too. That's one side. The other side is arrogance. A lot of founders are still stuck in build it and they will come and build a great product and people will appear, and then they see ChatGPT coming and see, here's the proof. If you build something great, people run, without taking into account that ChatGPT is a history changing product. No, like 99.9999999% of founders out there will never build the next ChatGPT. As much as they delude themselves, it's not going to happen, which means you need sales skills. So, and then there's the other thing. So there is this arrogance that, okay, I don't need sales because I'm only a product person. There is the culture that tells you don't need sales because sales is manipulative. Reality is you do need sales. And the main thing founders struggle to is that they excel at getting trust and making friends. But, friends don't buy. Founders have this thing that they think, oh my God, I talk to people about my company and they're so excited. Yes, but how many of those turn into meetings? And how many of those meetings turn into money? Because it comes down to that. As much as you love your product, to stay in business and to not have to get a job, you need money. So how
Yeah.
many of your excited people? Because, if my grandma was still alive, I could still go to her, tell her about Durindal, and she would be extremely excited. That's very sweet, but not beneficial to us. So,
Well, you make a good point. It's a lot of founders that end up in a situation where your calendar, you've got a full calendar. Look, I've got 10 meetings booked for Tuesday. I've got 10 meetings booked for Wednesday. And, those are good, especially in the beginning. You need that momentum. Those conversations are going to help you sharpen your messaging, sharpen your positioning, understand where people actually see the value in your product or service. But you can easily end up in the trap where you're having a ton of conversations, but they don't really lead to anything. You're really just building a fan base. That's good. You need that fan base. You need grandma standing behind you. Let's go, Sebastian. But at the end of the day, I knew that was going to be funny. At the end of the day, what you really need are results, because that results being closing deals, converting some of those relationships into revenue. That's ultimately going to be what fuels the momentum that carries you forward. When you have that revenue, now we can really build the product for the people that we want to serve. But coming out of the gate, you rarely ever have a product that is just feature built for your exact IT. But I think we have to look at, okay, so here's a good set of questions I think we could run through. How do I know as a founder if the conversations, let's say, we do a lot of coffee chats, right? We're looking to build our network a little bit. So we integrate some coffee chats into our weekly cadence. Now, a lot of those coffee chats, some could be potential prospects or future clients, whatever it may be. But a lot of the coffee chats are really just a networking call. Hey, great to meet you. Loved what you posted, or something like that. They're never going to lead to real tangible results. So if I'm the founder, what can I do in conversations like that to better understand what is the future of this relationship with this person? Right now, I think that kind of goes into the dirty word of, am I going to be able to eventually close this person? But how can we shift our perception of building that relationship, diagnosing what pain points they might have, and establishing a real relationship, so it's less about closing and more about getting them in front of the right person that can actually gives a shit about helping them solve their problems.
it's curiosity, right? And that's what founders need to understand. The mindset shift you need to start selling is not that radical. It's just, you have a product. Your product happens to provide a result of some sort, hopefully, solve a problem even better. With those two things in mind, every time you sit in front of somebody, start asking them about the things that they could be dealing with if they are potential candidates for your product. So depending on what you're selling, you will start the conversation normally. Then you will ask them, like, how did you solve this? Have you ever dealt with this? Do you know people dealing with this? What did they do to fix it? Just being legitimately curious about the other person's business and daily life will get you all the information you need to know, okay, this is a potential lead. This is a partner that could help me spread to different companies. Or this is somebody that's totally unqualified and I don't want to be talking to them.
Yeah,
It's simple. It's literally just curiosity.
it really is. Makes me think about A conversation I had a month ago with a CRO, and she got on the call. I could tell she was really stressed out. She wasn't really in the mood for like, hey, how's it going? It's great to meet you. And so I just kind of switched right over to, hey, if you don't mind me asking, is something bothering you? Like you seem a little stressed out. Yes, I'm stressed because I'm dealing with this whole political dynamic at work, and I'm trying to prove that, our forecast and our budget are airtight and our reps are actually performing at a high level. Okay, hey, let's have a conversation about that. Like, how did that evolve? Like, how did that come up? To where, hey, there might be this layer where the CEO doesn't trust what the CRO or the CMO is giving him. And then that evolved into a much bigger conversation, which is now what I would call a really good relationship. And this isn't somebody we've pitched. This isn't somebody that we've tried to sell anything to. This has really just been a relationship rooted in, hey, I'm happy to hop on a call and just listen to what you got to say and then give you some advice from my perspective. And I think especially, in today's world where people are just constantly being pitch slapped, what actually makes you stand out throughout a quote unquote sales process is being confident enough not to pitch. Now, yeah, I think that there's a layer to that you mentioned on our last podcast of, well, if we're talking morality within sales, I would be doing you a disservice if you told me you had all of these problems and I didn't at least mention, listen, I told you I wouldn't pitch, but you just told me that you're dealing with some pretty pressing issues. I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't at least tell you how I can help you solve those. That's a little bit different than hopping on a call and then immediately talking about yourself, immediately bragging about yourself, and then telling you about all the services that you provide and all the clients that you worked with. Because then what you're doing and how you're reframing that is you're truly showing that you're listening to that person. You're truly showing an interest and, to your point, curiosity around what they're actually dealing with.
Also, sometimes you don't even have to, they will be the ones to bring up how you can help.
Yeah.
If you demonstrate curiosity, and as you do, you drop a couple free pieces of meaning usually, unless you're fake, usually giving somebody free advice on one thing
Yeah.
will not make you lose the business. Actually, will make you earn trust, especially if you give them solid, tactical, actionable advice. If it's good enough, they will get, okay, where did this come from? Like, what do you mean? Tell me more. And then you can start telling them more, helping them actually live on a call. It's what traditional salespeople call consultative sales. Of course, you don't want to reveal the sauce in the discovery call, otherwise you don't get the business. But you can solve. No, there's always problems come in breadcrumbs. You can always, have them follow, like have them pick up 5 of those breadcrumbs, and then the other 8 they pay for. So it's also, sales can be about being generous. Actually, I just realized that.
Yeah. I think that's a good jumping off point because we're sitting here, we're talking about sales, some of the issues that founders run into with sales. We have Q4 coming up. I think a position that a lot of people get stuck in is, well, I've got 8 weeks here till I really need to dial things in for Q4. And I think the reality is, we're beyond the testing phase at this point, and now our focus is on engineering the conditions to actually win Q4. So from a sales standpoint, like what's your opinion on how am I prepping myself over the next 8 weeks to look ahead to Q4 and say, this is how we're going to win? Like everything I've done up to this year in most industries, your biggest quarter, you've been optimizing, you've been testing, you've been iterating, calibrating, whatever you want to call it, to get to this moment to where, hey, we're going to drive 60, 70% of our business in the final 90 days of the year. How do I need to be prepping for that from a sales perspective?
You need to be doing a lot of, you need to be looking into stalled deals. First of all, you cannot, even if a deal has been stalled for a couple months, you cannot just give up on that. You need to go through those calls. You need to go through those client pain points and reach out to them, asking them if they fix that problem, as a way to start the conversation back up if they hired somebody else. That's one. The stalled deals, they need to come back to life if you can bring them back to life. And the other thing is all the relationships you built in the previous quarters. You need to pick them back up, send a message, get a coffee chat, walk them through your process, understand if there is a need, qualify hard. And then I would say finally, if you want to maximize your chances of success in Q4, besides what we said, or what I just said here, it's gonna be make sure you know how to properly close.
Yeah.
Meaning, it's easy to say, "Oh yes, we excel at closing," when all you do is close people who anyway would have closed regardless. You need to be ready for all the possible objections that somebody can bring you, and that requires a lot of training. That requires a lot of preparation. Is why we partner up with Textego, because a platform like that allows you to drill. They allow you to have dry runs before it's showtime.
Yeah.
So I think those are the points. What about you? What do you think from a go-to-market perspective? How do you maximize the results of the quarter?
Well, I think the big shift happens with, the marketing team in a lot of ways. Of marketing has so much onus on them to drive demand throughout the year. And in a lot of cases, you're not going to be capturing any of that demand. You're not going to be converting any of that demand. I mean, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, really industry dependent. But we really need marketing to kind of shift away from this demand generation mindset to now we are conversion catalysts for the sales team. And a really good way to get some clear understanding on whether or not marketing is set up to do that is simply asking your marketing team, what's working right now, right? Where are we actually finding traction? Where are we actually finding success? You had mentioned stalled deals. How can we pressure test some of those stalled deals? How can we find out, is there an issue with the champion on the deal? Did a new executive come onto the team, or did an executive get replaced? And then having what we talk about, having kill switch discipline, which is, hey, if it's not working, we need to get rid of it and push more of our resources, our time, our effort, and our energy into where our highest value opportunities are. Again, going back to the conversation of thinking of marketing as a recon team, right? A successful battle plan doesn't start by, all right, we're going to break everybody up and find all these targets and go attack all these targets at once. You start with the targets that allow you to systematically gives you the best opportunity to systematically move towards your highest value target. And it's like, an Air Force fighter pilot, right? We don't just put them in a plane and give them, hey, here, I think it's over here. I think it's over here. You're going to need to drop it there. No, we give them the systems and the resources to have pinpoint accuracy on where they're headed. So I think that's the big mindset shift from a marketing standpoint, is getting out of the demand generation mindset and becoming a conversion catalyst for your sales team, and putting things in place that truly enable them. Talking about a Google sheet with your ebooks and your slide decks. I'm talking about giving them granular field level intel on where the highest value opportunities are. That's actually what your sales team wants from you.
I think that nails it. I love the fighter pilot metaphor, especially because there was like a few weeks ago that attack on the nuclear bases in Iran,
Yeah.
and people think it was like one solitary B-2 plane flying through the skies and then hitting this target. It was actually like if I remember correctly, at least like 6 B-2 planes sent in different directions, accompanied by different escorts of other planes, supported by tank planes, supported by international intelligence. It's like to reach a target takes collective effort.
Yeah.
And that's why your metaphor about marketing being the recon team is so on point, because the role of marketing is crucial. It needs to provide the target, like this is where you hit, this is how we take home the result. Sales does the rest. One cannot succeed without the other. Just
Yeah.
like you cannot just send a pilot out there and tell them, hey, go to this area and you should see this thing that looks like a bunker. And when you see it, kind of press the button and hit it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
What's interesting? I actually have a story from when I was in combat. We were running a dual mission with the Air Force, and there was a situation that happened that did make the news. It made Army Times and it made several other outlets, where a Air Force pilot ended up dropping a 500-pound bomb on my outpost. Thankfully, Nobody got critically injured. There were people that lost their vision for 30, 40 days. A lot of guys had to get medevaced out. And what happened was the ground level team, your JTAC guys, had mixed up the grid coordinates, right? They had identified they had identified the wrong spot where the opportunity was. Unfortunately, that happened to be they gave them the grid coordinates for our position and not the enemy position. And we're the ones that ended up missing the target and taking that brunt force, right? And so, not that marketing and sales is life or death, but all of that came down to a simple communication error. It was nothing more than that. It was a captain who had his book flipped upside down and and if you want to put it in the marketing and sales context, a captain giving the wrong intel and then the sales team delivering the package or executing on the wrong opportunity. So, those things really go hand in hand. And I think that marketing and marketers in general, you know, I get it. In college, we're told we're brand people and that marketing and sales are separate functions. We talked about this last week where marketing is sales. At the end of the day, marketing is sales. It's just a different form of sales. And I would love to hear your perspective as, somebody who's been in sales a lot longer than I have of, as a sales leader, how do you want your marketing team to support you? Like what actually makes an effective marketing team from a sales leader's point of view?
It's interesting. Having been on both sides, I saw these marketing teams that they couldn't even agree on what an MQL was. And once they did, other teams cannot agree on why an MQL is relevant for sales. Like they cannot also decide when to do the handoff. Like what turns an MQL into an SQL and then you can hand them off to sales. As a sales leader, you want your marketing team to be providing you with information fast, which they usually do, meaning you need a slide deck, they provide it. But you need, as you said, you need them to provide you with the right information, meaning you want a prioritized list of leads because then you're not going to spend your time having calls with people that are actually unqualified. So a marketing team that's very strict in qualifying, a marketing team that doesn't settle for saying, hey, they downloaded the paper and then they opened the email to grab the PDF as a qualification criteria,
Yeah.
is a marketing team that can provide better results. However, this is important. This has to be backed by a management team that understands it, meaning the CRO or the CEO, whoever is on top of the CMO, must accept that marketing is not there to produce 300 leads a month. Maybe they'll produce 30. But if there are 30 leads, high quality and qualified, the conversion rate will be higher, the close rate will be higher, sales will be grateful, and the company will get better results. But what you see sometimes is that marketing operates under unnecessary pressure, both from sales, because yes, marketing lacks the skill to get the right leads together, and from management, which sometimes some marketing teams have the skill to provide you the right leads and prioritize them. But if the CEO is putting the CMO under extreme pressure because he needs to see big numbers, then the CMO will not prioritize anything and just provide you the numbers.
Yeah.
So it also has to come from a place of empathy with the CMO and the role. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Like the CMO needs to be empowered to say, hey, there is a reason why I'm not promising or providing 200 leads a month and why we only provided 20. But out of those 20, 5 closed.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. Well, I think it gets you out of the, growth at all cost mindset where you basically just have a bunch of sales reps performing against activity metrics, but a lot of times, and in most cases, that's not going to provide real pipeline value. You're just going to have a pipeline full of opportunities that never convert. And then when you go and look at that data, you're, from a CEO perspective, you're confused as to why, okay, we're generating all of these opportunities, but we seem to struggle to convert them. It might not be that you're struggling to convert the right opportunities. You just have a pipeline where that deviation between great opportunities and just bad fit opportunities is so wide. You don't actually have a real view on what's working. And when you have that kind of situation, your data never really tells you the story. And this is kind of what gets me into the next topic of I'm a CEO, I'm a CFO. What should I be focusing on going into Q4? How do I actually know, hey, we're set up for a great quarter? Or we're not set up for a great quarter, and we've got 8 freaking weeks to get our shit together and fix this, because ultimately at the end of the day, this is where 60% of our revenue might come from, 70% of our revenue.
I'm gonna throw this one back to you because that's leadership, that's a lot of GTM, that's a lot of execution. So how does a CEO under pressure in Q4 make up for the lost time?
Well, I think the biggest point to start from is I've talked about this like decoupling of leadership from their frontline teams. And the reason I talk about this is because there's so much field level intel that doesn't show up in a dashboard or a CRM or in a report. And if that's all you're looking at, you can kind of have a skewed view of where the business really sits. But if I'm actually, and I'm not, when I say field level teams, I'm not talking about your marketing directors. I'm talking about the people actually managing and executing the campaigns, executing your sales motion, your customer success managers on a day to day basis. Like, what is their perception of where we win and where we lose? What is their perception of like, what do we actually do really well? And where do we need to inject some more resources so we can bring up this area of the business? A lot of times you're not going to see that in dashboards and reports. And this is why I think it's so important that executives start to get back to the front lines. And what I mean by that is, hey, maybe every Friday you go sit in on 5 calls with an SDR. Maybe every Friday you go sit with your marketing team for an hour. You do a campaign debrief with them, right? This isn't about removing layers of leadership. This is about integrating leadership from the middle out instead of the top down. And I think that this is a big piece of evolution that's taking place, especially with go to market today, is you have AI. It's more important than ever that you actually act on a lead and you act on an opportunity faster than your competition does. Okay. And then at the same time, it's harder than ever to differentiate who's actually going to be our best service provider or the best product for us to go with. And if I'm a CEO, maybe this is impossible in a 20,000 person company. But if I'm in a 200-person company, this is totally possible to be doing on a rolling basis, where maybe one Friday you're meeting with the sales team, frontline people who are giving you no bullshit feedback on, hey, these are the real conversations I'm having. You're not getting the full story from my sales director. You're not getting the full story from my CMO. Okay. Because a lot of times we're dealing with those internal politics where people are trying to cover their ass and they're trying to put some roses on top of that story to make everything seem a little better than it is. But if we as a culture can address the real challenges head on, well, hey, that accelerates our path to winning, that accelerates our path to success. So I think that that's a big piece of it, is having, and as a RevOps guy, I'm saying this, having the dashboards, having the tools and the reports, all of those things are great. But if you can't tell me the company's story, like the real time story of what's working and what's not working and where your people are struggling to execute, well, then you don't really have a true understanding of the business. This goes back to what we talked about last week. If I tell you a story, and let's say you go tell that story to your sales director, you go tell it to all the AEs, they go tell it to the CSO, etc. Let's say it goes through 50 people. By the time everybody has buttered up that story to cover their ass and make it look like they're having some kind of impact that maybe they might not be having, and that might not be their fault. They might not be getting the resources that they need. Again, because the CEO or the CFO doesn't have that field level intel that they need to act on. So it all kind of comes back in on each other of, it's really important that we think about leadership. We start to look at leadership as a middle out function and not so much as of a top down function, where we're giving people agency and authority to make critical business decisions in real time versus working through layers of bureaucracy. That's how innovation happens in a company. And that's how you actually accelerate your path to success, not by sitting and thinking about it for 4 weeks. And, should we do it? Should we not do it? You have to get to a point where you can make those decisions as a team and live and die with the results, but also have a plan to back that up.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That was pretty great.
I don't know. It would have sounded a lot better coming with your voice.
Come on, too modest.
Yeah.
Still people with great voices in here.
I want to leave people with some tactical things that they can do where, you don't have to change your entire sales approach, right? You don't have to change your entire operating approach or your go-to-market strategy. So let's spend a few minutes just talking about, okay, I'm a founder that's struggling with sales right now. I'm really struggling with just getting leads in the door, or I'm really struggling with just going from a coffee chat or an intro conversation to figuring out, I know that they have a problem, but I just can't get them to talk about it. How can I start working on that right now and seeing some kind of immediate impact in the business?
If you're a founder and you are struggling to get people to talk about their problems, there's only two reasons for that. The first one is that you're talking too much, meaning when they ask you about what you do, you immediately give in and start talking about your product or your company or whatever, or your service. The second reason, though, and the most likely one, is that you are not asking the right questions. And this is going to sound trivial, but you cannot limit yourself to asking people yes or no questions. Say that you're selling accounting software. You cannot ask them, were you late with your tax return this year? They will say no and shut up. First of all, because who wants to tell you they were late with a tax return?
Yeah.
Second, because you ask them a yes or no question. So maybe they are telling the truth. Maybe it's no. However, maybe they have a deeper problem on the accounting side that you could solve if you had asked something like, hey, it's almost the end of the quarter. How have things been at your company from the accounting side? Oh, well, they have been kind of slow, but we're getting there. And they are vague. That's the issue. Sometimes founders will try to play sales guy and ask a question. And the moment they get an answer, they take it at face value. The reality is people suck at giving information the moment you ask for it. So you need to follow up. You need to follow up by mirroring them, by saying, it's been kind of going slow. They will tell you, oh, yes, it's going slow because we have problems with our current QuickBooks, whatever software they're using. The thing is, questions. If you as a founder cannot get away to find out what a person is truly dealing with, you're asking the wrong questions. So you're not asking enough questions. You're just happy with the first thing that they tell you. It's never the case. You shouldn't be doing that. So tactical advice, take control of the conversation by letting them talk. Counterintuitive, I know, but you have to take control by asking questions.
Yeah. Well, I
What
think
about you? What's the tactical thing you would leave people with?
really quickly to your point, I think when you lead, this goes back to your point on curiosity. When you allow yourself to just be curious and not worry so much about a conversion or a deal coming out of that conversation, you actually show that you have the confidence to help people by being curious. And I think that goes to make your point. I forgot what you asked me there.
What's your tactical advice to leave people with? What can they do to just execute properly as we approach Q4, get better results?
This is something that, if we're talking about founders, a lot of times founders live with tactical chaos. They live with operational, disparity where they can execute well for a couple days, but then they get burnt out because what they're executing against is very hard to maintain because they don't. And I get it. You're trying to build a business and you're a one man or a two or three man show, and there's a lot going on and that's a lot to manage. So I think, taking a day or two and just looking at what you have in place. What do you have in your pipeline? What have I actually gotten out of these conversations? And how can I execute on those? Okay. Deals in your pipeline. What kind of information could I get these people? What's a narrative or a story I could tell that maybe they're not hearing from other people about the state of an industry or the state of AI, whatever that is, right? At this point, we're just trying to make connections with these high value opportunities and re-engage in those conversations. And what we're really trying to do is redevelop that connection, build that bridge back, your fingers cracked, build that bridge back to getting the conversation to going to your point. Again, this is about, from a marketing standpoint, this is about switching that hat from I'm just trying to build inbound leads, I'm trying to build funnels, I'm trying to launch campaigns. Those are all there to kind of support the sales team in Q4. By now, hopefully, you've figured out what's going to work. You've tested, you've recalibrated, you know what's going to work. Now we just need to get ruthless on what we're going to execute on. So if I'm a founder, where are my 2 or 3 highest value opportunities? How do I execute on those? And what systems do I need to put into place to help support me through that? And then number 2, if I'm a CMO or I'm a CEO, I'm looking at how do we know that what we're forecasting on is based on truth? How do I know that we've completely de-risked our pipeline? Like how am I looking at the pipeline right now? What are the real stories attached to each deal? And how do we actually know that we don't have a pipeline that's full of a bunch of risk where we're going to put all of our time, energy, and resources into working bad opportunities instead of focusing the 80% on those, 10 or 20 opportunities that would actually get us over the line. So it's not so much about doing more. Actually, it's a lot less about doing more. And it's a lot more about being very focused and very targeted with your time, your resources, and really putting that sales hat on from a marketing perspective.
Yes, especially because the whole. I think sometimes for marketers, funnels are a form of coping.
Yeah.
Meaning, they think, well, build a funnel and clients will come. The fact that you try, if I see a marketer trying to fix everything through a funnel, I'm seeing somebody who either is not very good at what they do or is very green in their craft. Meaning, any true marketer in 2025, at least in my opinion, should know that the customer journey is not linear. Nobody will download your papers, read your 5 emails, take a phone call, get to a discovery call, have 3 discovery calls and close. Not how buyers work. So sometimes I see, I like your point because founders cope with funnels.
Yeah. I mean, you have to lead with aggression. I think that's the way I like to frame it, right? I'm a big fan of Jocko Willing, and his first rule is lead with aggression. That doesn't mean, being loud and boisterous and creating chaos that doesn't need to exist. But what it means is getting ruthlessly focused on what you're going to execute on. And like you said, I think you made a great point. Funnels are great. Nobody wants to go down a funnel anymore. Right. There's some people that, they'll get some value out of you sending them into like a short nurture track or something like that. Those are really there for educational purposes, not conversion purposes. And leaning on those things to be the frontline engagement for building those relationships, especially as a founder, does not serve you best. Those really need to be looked at support tools, support mechanisms, more so than your leading edge when it comes to engaging with your prospects and engaging with your potential clients, whatever it may be. So yeah, I thought that was a great point. Another point I want to make as well is, maybe we can talk about this later, but you'll see teams, they do have great wins in Q4, but then they struggle to carry that over into the next year. It's almost like they're starting from scratch all over again. And I think that you really have to be diligent about at Q4, you have got to be diligent about, especially if you're a SaaS company or a product-led company, you've got to be diligent about onboarding, mastering your onboarding process, supporting those customers through the first 90 days. I mean, the data shows that for most SaaS companies, after the first 10 days, customer adoption just goes straight down. I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head. But if you can win at the customer level, that fixes so many of your bottom of the funnel issues to begin with. And now you have a bunch of customers that are like, this was such an easy product for us to adopt. We got all of the support we needed. We didn't have to deal with a bunch of runaround from sales. And hey, guess what? I know this goes against traditional beliefs, but the sales rep that we spent 6 months building a relationship didn't just go total ghost mode on us after we signed a $50,000 project. He was actually there to help guide and lead us through that. Now, I know your customer support team is there for that, but you still need the people that were in those conversations building the relationship having early engagement and touch point once that deal goes through.
That's a great point. It's also, there's a lot of upside for the sales rep too. It's lifetime value. It's somebody that will be easier to sell to in the future. New products, new features, new services. It's good business for everybody. I like that.
Absolutely. So, all right, brother. I think we covered a lot this week. I think we're going to have some really cool, based on the conversations we've got set up for the rest of this week and some of the client projects we're working on. I think we're going to have some really exciting, maybe some perspectives and real-time learnings to bring to the table next week. So, if you got value out of this podcast, I promise you next week's going to be even better. And as we continue to work out the kinks, this is our first two, Durindal based podcast recordings we've done with each other. As we develop, our relationship and as we develop our flow, I promise you, these are going to be great. This is going to be like getting your MBA for free on the Durindal
Yes.
YouTube channel.
Yes, and as we grow the company, it's truly gonna be an MBA, meaning we have one person with us, it's a team of 3, but over time, as we hire the first people, as we scale operations, you're gonna be able to witness a company coming together. So stay tuned.
I'm really excited to share that part too, because I think we're going to give people a little bit of a different perspective. And not that this is an area that we plan on working in, but there's traditionally like a few ways to build a go-to-market strategy firm. And I think we're truly doing it in a unique way that doesn't rely so much on funnel building and, PDF downloads. And it's really what we've done, especially the last 4 or 5 months. It's been very relationship driven, playing the long game, not getting caught up in the, we got to go make $1 million this year to prove to everybody else just how awesome we are. Okay.
Yes.
You got hired at some of the great companies you got hired at because people know that you can do those things. Now you're running a business. It requires a little bit of a different approach. And I think we're going to give people, like I said, a world-class lens around how you can do that in a way that suits you best versus trying to do it like everybody else.
I agree.
All right. All right, y'all. Until next time, I'm Garrath Robinson. That's Sebastian Hidalgo. And we'll see you guys next week. See ya.
See you next week.